sorry. Now it's 6 p.m. It is 6 p.m. and I will call this meeting of the Luneburg Town Council to order. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And I'd also like to take time to acknowledge that tonight is fairly momentous in that staffing us at this meeting and discharging that function is the last requirement of our longtime CAO, B. Renton, before she retires. I think it's fair to say that this is an end of an era for the town of Luneburg and that we thank B for her years of dedicated service and support to the town and to council. So I just want us to take that moment to thank B. As you all know, B has a shy streak and probably found that excruciating. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome another seasoned veteran of municipal government who will be taking over as interim CAO until we can find a permanent replacement, and that is Kevin Malloy, who was most recently the CAO at the municipality of the District of Luneburg, and Kevin has kindly agreed to come help us out while we do a permanent search. So thank you, Kevin, for coming in to help us. All right, and with that, and noting the addition, I will look for a motion to approve the agenda as circulated. Moved by Councillor Ernst, seconded by Councillor Sanford. Any additions or deletions, save for the Transgender Day of Remembrance to note? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. That leaves us with the 25th and 26th council meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to approve those? The Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Duggan. Any errors or omissions to note? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. We have no public hearings or presentations. That takes us on to correspondence. There are two pieces of correspondence. One is the Department of Municipal Affairs notice of a one-time additional $50,000 financial town foundation grant, sorry. Lisa, if you wanted to speak to that, just for everybody's benefit.
Sorry, Your Worship. Yes, that we had spoken about this probably at the last variance report that the province had announced that they were topping up the foundation grants this year. And so that is just a notification that we have received that funding and that they will be, working towards revamping that memorandum of understanding with municipalities.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And the second piece of correspondence is the request to declare November 13th to 20th Trans Awareness Week. And November 20th is the Trans Day of Remembrance and raise the trans flag. And there's a draft proclamation there and a motion. Can I get somebody to move that? Moved by Councillor Ernst, seconded by Councillor Birtles. Is there any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. That takes us on to business arising from the minutes or unfinished business. Item A is the 2021 variance report to August 31st. There's a staff information report provided. At least perhaps you can summarize that for everyone's benefit.
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship. As noted, it's an information report. It includes the status of our capital projects in the first few pages. The operating budgets are where I would expect them to be at this point in the fiscal year. Just to note, the transfer tax collected is more than we anticipated to August 31st for our capital section, and the operating component just started in August, but however, I am optimistic that we should reach our budgeted revenues for the year. And on the note of the parking revenues, I also expect with the movie, TV, film activity of the summer that we should reach our parking revenues as well this year.
Thank you for that, Lisa. Are there any questions or comments at this stage? Councillor Sanford.
Because I'm new and I'm still learning, I'm wondering, is it possible for us to utilize unexpended monies that were anticipated to be spent? And I'd have to go back and look at that because I'm thinking specifically of an example, to something that is short on budget money, i.e. Blockhouse Hill, moving forward with that. So I'm just wondering, is that possible at this point?
So to amend the budget to move money around to things that are underfunded.
Certainly, if council wishes to do that on a capital project, it's certainly able to do that
By motion of council.
by motion of council, yes.
Any further comments or questions at this stage? All right, seeing none, we will move on to item 8. There is a notice of motion by Councillor Halverson. The motion is provided, but Councillor Halverson, perhaps you'd like to speak to your notice?
So I'd like to say, I know my name's attached to this, but it's actually a notice from myself, Councillor Sanford and Councillor Duggan. We all sit on a committee with a couple of residents in town, Fawn Creaser and Ann Weeks, been working very hard to look at getting housing into the town. We had set up a meeting with Werner Hofstetter with CMHC, and he was very informative on some of the programs and some of the limitations CMHC is facing. One of the things they've noticed is that they don't have accurate data on what rents actually are in this town, or frankly, any town or municipality in the province, which is why they use a provincial average. So it would be beneficial if we could have a study done to find out, what the average rent is in Luneburg, what, median rents, top and bottom, that kind of thing, just to provide them some statistics. So when developers come to them talking about affordable housing, they're being quoted the proper rate, which would aid them in building appropriate development here. So my motion here basically is to provide funding for a study, so we can provide that information to CMHC for the benefit of the town.
And just to clarify, Lisa, this would be a pre-approval for next year's budget, basically, if it couldn't be accommodated this year.
Certainly, if council wished to do that, it could be a pre-approved item, or it could just be part of the consideration for the budget, is depending on how
Okay.
council wished to.
Yeah, no, it's just something to clarify for sure.
I think in my motion, I'd be looking for a pre-approval. I think this is an important item. It's top of priorities. It goes along with our comprehensive community plan. So I think, we should put that in our budget.
That's why I wanted to
Yeah,
clarify.
thank you.
So I'm sure, Ann, you're doing the recording secretary duties tonight. Can you capture, I assume, an amendment by unanimous consent, even though it hasn't been moved yet? That, well, actually, it would be property of the mover, now that I'm thinking about my Robert's Rules training. So to change that to be pre-approval for the budget. Yep.
Sorry. That $20,000 be pre-approved in the 2022-23 budget for a study that will provide current information on rental rates in the town of Lunenburg. Study must include a determined median rental rate, as well as the number of long-term and short-term rental units available in the town.
Thanks. I presume that's a second. Well, why don't you second it and then it can be amended? All right, so moved by Councillor Halverson, seconded by Councillor Duggan. Now, Councillor Duggan with a proposed amendment.
It's not an amendment necessarily, but so in trying to determine the number of long-term and short-term rental units available, would we also be looking at occupancy? So how many of those units are actually occupied or what's available? Because that would be useful information, I think, as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of useful information that we could gain. I don't know how broad we want to get this study. Like, obviously, the finer grain we get down, the more detailed, the probably longer and more costly it will be. So I think, I don't know, I'm not against it. I think it's a great motion. I don't know what this is actually going to cost. I think some of the preliminary numbers that were tossed around when Werner was speaking, that $20,000 seemed reasonable for what we were proposing here. I don't know if that would capture what you're trying to get, but I think that's valuable information, and I'm not opposed to, increasing the requested allocation if that will help this fund get the study and get the move forward.
It's your motion.
Okay.
Well, actually, now technically it's the property assembly, so it would have to be moved and amended, but
Yeah.
so anybody else looking to speak on this? Ask Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess my question would be to whom is this information valuable to? And also, how valuable, I mean, we mentioned developers. Well, if I was a prudent developer, I think, I would want to have that research done myself. I wouldn't necessarily trust the study. 20,000 is a lot of tax dollars to throw at a study. I mean, if we could say we'd approve it based on finding funding for this, I'd be all for it. But I think just to dip into the budget at this point in time is not really being, not the wisest choice we could make right now.
Councillor Halverson.
So to answer the deputy mayor's question, the issue is, it actually is, it behooves developers in a couple of ways, mainly. Sorry, I realized my mic was turned off. It helps developers in a couple of ways by actually having accurate data. We don't have to make assumptions about what the rents are here. We don't know that, is a one-bedroom apartment here with one bedroom, one bath. Is it $700 here? The same as it's $700 in New Waterford, the same as it's $700 in Sydney Mines or in Halifax, because that's what we're getting lumped in with, right? So when a developer goes to say, I want to build some affordable housing, CMHC says, okay, fine. Affordable housing unit is $700 a month here, right? But we don't know that. Maybe it's 900. And if it is 900, they've got no way of proving. Gladly meet whatever requirements are there if we have the data to back it up. So this is the data they're requesting to back it up. So this is going to aid in getting developers and getting that affordable housing that they need. So I think, $20,000 for a study to provide accurate data to potentially bring more development and more housing stock to this town, I think it's a good investment. There was a second part to your question, though, I think I missed.
Well, just the pre-approval part is the part that concerns me,
okay,
because we
yes.
don't know quite what we're going to be
Well,
facing.
the other part I would add on to that too is I would request it was pre-approved, but I may perhaps we could amend it one more time. We're making it up on as we go here at this point, but I actually don't think it's a bad idea to say we'll pre-approve this in the budget, but we should look for funding from the province. This has been something the province has identified they're willing to work on. I've actually asked the question of the premier myself and whether we just glazed over and just give a stock answer, but he did say this is something he'd be willing to consider funding. So I think we should look to the province to see if there is money as well. So we could add that into the motion, but I do think this issue is important enough. And given the priority we've placed on housing as a council and in our community plan, I think $20,000 is a reasonable ask to provide that data to get housing in this town.
Thank you, Councillor Halverson. And just to clarify, the intent for people who might not understand, because it's fairly technical, is that by providing this study and having this accurate data, people doing development and building housing in the town of Luneburg can access more funds from CMHC. So that's really the 20,000 is, to your point, and I'm not making a comment for this from the chair, but a down payment on, future funding, hopefully from different programs. Yeah. Could we say that it is an amendment by unanimous consent that Anne draft some language around staff seeking funding? That seems to be okay as a preference. Everything's better when we don't have to pay for it. Deputy Mayor?
Well, I just would like one more and just say it would be for budget consideration instead of pre-approval.
Okay, so that would be a bit, I don't know where the room is at on that one. So is it unanimous consent to ask that staff seek funding for this? Okay. And you can come up with some language there, not to put you on the spot. You can just read that back. No, I think it was felt that that would be beyond scope. Yeah.
We're all talking without microphones here. I voiced that opinion, but I'd like to hear if that's okay with the rest of the council too.
So let's just dispose of this first because that was amended by unanimous consent. And then I'll try to get through the three other things we're amending this motion on.
So the motion itself is, as I read it before, but at the end, government funding will be sought for the study.
Okay, thank you. All right, given that Councillor Duggan's proposed amendment regarding occupancy rates was first, we can speak to that. If anybody would like to speak to that. Or share Councillor Halverson's view to extend the scope, which would extend the funding, I would think. Councillor Bertels.
I don't think we need to extend the scope.
Councillor Sanford.
When we're talking about occupancy, if I understand correctly, there isn't occupancy, and that's the issue. We don't have enough housing. So I'm wondering, to Councillor Halverson's point, is it that we need to extend it to include that when I would say we're fairly confident we already know the answer to it? There isn't occupancy, everything is filled, is what my understanding is, right?
Anyone else? No? I'm assuming, unless you want to put that as a formal amendment and come up with some language, that that's not the will of council to proceed. Okay. That brings us back to the deputy mayor's point about budget consideration rather than pre-approval. If you would like to move, I know that was changed from the original motion, but it was still the property of the mover at that point. If you would like to move an amendment to say budget consideration, then we will entertain that at this stage.
I do so, yes.
Is there a seconder for that? Councilor Bertels. All right, so that means that we would remove pre-approval from the motion, to strike that, and to insert budget consideration. The $20,000 be considered in the 20, yeah, okay. Does everyone understand that? So at this point, we're voting on that amendment only, not on the main motion. Is that understood? Is there any discussion or debate on the amendment? Councilor Halverson.
Yeah, I just would like to reiterate my point that, as we talked about, this has been identified as a priority. I think setting it as a pre-approval signals that we're serious about getting development here and getting what needs to happen moving as quickly as possible so we can get development happening in this town. I don't think $20,000 is an exorbitant amount to signal that.
Okay, Councilor Sanford.
If I understand from the budget correctly, we deferred $26,000 in the annex roof. So I'm thinking there is some money that hasn't been used in this fiscal year that potentially could be used for this particular matter.
So this is a pre-approval for next year's budget, but I can look to the finance director to weigh in on.
Yeah, so regarding that annex roof money, that was capital funding, right? And this would be considered an operating expense. So there would be some difficulties moving that particular funding to this.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else on the amendment? So just to clarify, the amendment is from Councilor Mosier. So if you vote in favor, it would be to move from pre-approval to consider. If you vote against, it would be to remain at pre-approved. Okay? On the amendment. All right, all those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Motion is defeated. So that brings us back to the main motion unamended. And is there any further discussion or debate on the main motion as it was presented previously with the unanimous amendment regarding seeking funding in the interim? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Finally, something we didn't all agree on. That takes us on to new business. So the first item of new business is a recommended appointment to the Harborview Haven Luneburg Home for Special Care Corporation Board There is a draft motion there to appoint or not appoint Patrick Morris. And I will see if it's anyone's pleasure to move that draft motion as presented, identifying to appoint. So from the deputy mayor to appoint, Councilor Ernst. I just have one question of staff. Why is this something that is council approval, for which council approval is necessary?
It's part of your bylaws, your worship. We could circulate a copy of them. It's a bit of an antiquated arrangement. but
I was going to say, can we
nonetheless.
amend them rather than circulate them? And like, might be a thought. Add it to the list. We'll add that to the bylaw and policy review list. Oh, not another private member's bill, please. Okay,
Can I just ask a question?
you may.
I'm on the Harborview Haven board, so do I need to declare a conflict or should I be voting?
I wouldn't say so unless there was an honorarium, and this might be a family member. Yeah, so I think you'd be fine. Thank you for asking.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Councilor Bertels. All right, so it has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Okay, that takes us on to item B, a special event permit application for Remembrance Day activities in town in kind support. There is a draft motion provided. Moved by Councilor Ernst, moving the motion, moved by Councilor Ernst, seconded by Councilor Halverson. Is there any discussion or debate? Councilor Halverson on a question.
I have no problem with the motion. I'm just curious again, where here, what was it? A day from Remembrance Day here at this point, 2 days from Remembrance Day. It just seems late coming to council. I'm sure it was the first opportunity that they had to present it to us as a whole, but perhaps could we get, motions like this sooner, just in case something does arise that I would hate to see something like that fall behind because it was too short notice. So.
And the only thing I generally say to that is staff put them on the very next agenda after they receive them.
I'm sure they did. Yeah.
You're right, your worship. We had not heard anything from the group, and so some of our staff reached out to them to inquire what their plans were with. Oh, I have no battery again.
There, yeah. We still got the rest of the meeting left, B.
If I can summarize your 5-minute explanation, it was you guys reached out as soon as you hadn't heard anything and found out that they were going to have the parade and brought it to council.
Yes.
As soon as possible. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Heather, you can at least wait until she's retired to cut the mic off.
Can I, can I comment?
Yeah.
Just thinking about any organization currently trying to make plans in COVID, probably leaving it more to the last minute, trying to understand what the protocols are and the public health requirements are. Just a thought.
Thank you, Councillor Sanford. Is there any further discussion or debate on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion's carried. That takes us on to a citizen vacancy on the Planning Advisory Committee. There is a draft motion to advertise for that and send a letter of appreciation to the retiring member, Derek Kinsman. Is it anyone's pleasure to move that motion? Councillor Sanford moving the motion as the PAC chair. Seconder, Councillor Halverson. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none? Those in favor? All those in favor? Let's try that again. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Don't jump the gun. It is. All right, that is the end of our public agenda. That takes us, I need a motion to move to meet in camera to consider contract negotiations pursuant to section 22 of the Municipal Government Act. Moved by Councillor Duggan, seconded by Councillor Ernst. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. And with council's indulgence, we'll take a 10-minute recess.